In this second part on our conversation or discussion section, I just want to review another example of a discussion section and show you where those rhetorical moves / elements are in this discussion section, just to give you a little bit more ideas, give you another idea of what kind of I'm looking for when you're writing your paper, and also, of course, for the future of your own reading and writing, to see some examples of how these rhetorical moves are integrated into the discussion section. So quick reminder, again, those are the common rhetorical moves for our discussion section. I'm trying to work here with the screen. Give me 1 second. I got to adjust it a little bit. There we go. 1 second. I think now already. Okay, hopefully you see everything clearly. Those are the several points. I'm not going to go through these again. Just as a refresher, there's different ways of writing about these, or saying what they are. This is just my particular way of my particular language of using those. So feel free to use that in your assignment, or come up with your own terms, or use some of the terms from the slide by Professor Sainani, or some of the terminology that Annesley is using in his text as well. So variety of things you can choose. But I'm going to use these again for this particular section as well. And hopefully you have the handout in front of you on the screen right next to this presentation. And if you had a chance to review those before, that's also great, because I'm going to go through these rather quickly, and the more familiar you are with these, the better off. I think the better you'll be able to follow my video. And of course, feel free to pause anytime and just kind of look at where I am, read the sentence, and then continue my narrative. All right. So this is the article on the research ethics of the Middle East. They're one of my colleagues from the School of Medicine, wrote Henry Silverman. He's the last author here. So there's a few things happening in this first paragraph that I've put in this particular slide. And again, just like the previous discussion section, I've taken out a lot of pieces because it's far too long, and I think the pieces I've selected clearly show the rhetorical moves. Some of the other paragraphs just do the same thing over and over again, right, with other findings and so on. So here, there's three things that are happening. So the key finding of the study is presented right at the beginning. Our study represents the first extensive study reporting on the prevalence of research misconduct among investigators at different institutions in the Middle East. And that's a direct answer to the research question and to the gap that was identified if you think back to the introduction that we looked at together. What these authors also do is, it's actually four, they identify the research gap or refer to the research gap identified in the introduction section, namely that there wasn't anything on the Middle East in terms of studies on prevalence of research misconduct among investigators at different institutions, right? That didn't exist. We had these two large studies referenced at the introduction. If you remember that, probably don't, but I'll tell you there were two that were referenced in the introduction that present studies on research misconduct among researchers in a Western context, but not in the Middle East. So right, the first sentence straight, right, gets the reader focused on that. Identifies the research gap, key findings of the study. The rest of this paragraph, there's two different things, and they kind of go hand in hand. Provides a context for the study's finding, especially this main finding, some of the findings. This is the main finding right here, and I'll talk about this in a second. But it contextualizes already in that first paragraph with other studies and compares it as well. So here the second sentence continues, similar to other studies performed in Western countries and in LMICs, our data indicate that scientific misconduct represents a significant issue that needs to be addressed. Specifically, our data showed, and again, the language here is we found, our data showed, very clear, that 59.4% of the respondents self-reported having committed at least one instance of research misconduct. And just for general edification, it's a pretty large number. And so the rest of the discussion section really does a lot of work in showing why this number is so high compared to others, and contextualizes that in connection with other studies and other data as well. So it says it right here, the frequency is slightly higher than that reported by Finelli in a systematic review of studies mainly from the US and UK, and so on. Our results are similar to the overall frequencies of so and so and involving Nigerian researchers. So outside of the Western context of Europe and US and UK, these results are fairly similar. So again, great context provided already in this first paragraph. The language, just like the previous discussion section from the article from the work safety. I don't think I commented on that in my video, but that article as well as this one A lot of active language. I'm hoping you're realizing that and you notice that. A lot of active language, and it makes it much easier for the reader to follow. So next slide continues here. I've taken some stuff out here on the bottom. I forgot the little dots. So comparing frequencies of misconduct between different studies is challenging as methodologies and types of definitions of research misbehavior might differ between the studies. So the authors here are kind of already, I went too fast, contextualizing some of the difficulties in the data set. And we'll get to that in the limitations more clearly. But it's already a foreshadowing here, which is kind of nice. With this caveat, the frequency of self-reported acts involved. And what happens then is, they're presenting another finding of their study and then contextualizing it again. Provide this context for the study's finding based on previous work in this area. The study by Fanelli is frequently, it's a systematic review, it's frequently referenced here. There's another study that's referenced. And so what is really nice, and I want to point this out, so it's saying some things, its results are higher than what have been reported in other studies, for example, and so on. However, our results regarding falsification and fabrication are similar to those reported in a study involving Nigeria. And that's similar to the previous paragraph, if you remember that. It was different from the systematic review by Fanelli, which focused on the UK and the US, but a lot more similar to the study in Nigeria. So again, those are the two areas or the two studies context that this particular work really compares itself to. Okay, and it continues actually throughout the section. I've taken out some things here. I've included another paragraph on an additional finding regarding plagiarism. 8.8 of our respondents reported having committed this behavior. Again, higher than by Martinson and colleagues in the US, but then again, Nigeria again reports a similar high number. Okay, so again, a constant back and forth. So what is interesting in this discussion section that I really like, it's a parallel structure. In each paragraph, it compares the results of this study to the study in the Western context and then to the one in the Nigerian context. Again, every single time showing similarities and differences. And so this one is the paragraph on limitations that I really like. Ooh. Let me go back here before So here there are several methodological limitations to our findings. Sorry, it was a mouthful. Right here first. So it continues, which is unfortunate. Remember in the previous one it was first, second, third. I kind of like that because when I see first, I'm expecting second. Although you don't necessarily have to do that, but it says first here in contrast. There's another furthermore, and I believe there's another one. I think I left this out. So the markers here are not as clear with first, second, third, and fourth as in the previous discussion section, but they're still there. So you can still, as a reader, follow those fairly easy. Although again, I think it's the clearer you can be, the better. But if you find first, second, third, fourth, just two in your face, that's okay too. So let's get back to this example. So there's several methodological limitations to our finding. First, accuracy of self-reporting, yada, 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 in contrast, yada, yada. So another limitation, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't find it earlier. Another limitation involves using a convenience sampling technique. Well, if you've done ever any work around statistical or research methods, that's always a big setback. Sometimes this can't be avoided because convenience sampling is the only thing that you can do. But it limits the extent, right? It says here, to which our findings can be generalized. So again, foreshadowing criticism that reviewers and editors might have. And I want to point out one thing to you, because I remember my colleague talked to me about the review process of this, and this is something that one of the reviewers commented on negatively, but they decided to keep it in. So let me show you. Furthermore, a small sample of investigators who obtained a degree from Western universities might challenge our result that this factor was significant for this difference we observed between. Although the result was statistically significant, so the significant is used just here, remember, for statistically significant results, not for anything else. Significant means statistically significant. So even though their result was significant, the reviewer commented on this was a very small sample and the significance should be questioned. But I want to point out to you how then these writers addressed it in the revision, and then they say something, however, notwithstanding the small sample size, there are advantages of comparing data from different groups within the same study. So they actually commented on, listen, we know it's a small sample, but there's a reason for that, right? So they provide some context for that. So you can have a limitation that's pretty severe, but it's still workable and publishable. So justifying the methodological choice is what these authors are doing here. And that might be, that's an avenue that you can use as well, or that you see in some of these texts that you're reading. And if you're writing yourself, that's something to keep in mind sort of in your toolbox. And then last, we're closing here with the last paragraph of the discussion. And just like all other good conclusions do, they suggest avenues for further research, and it starts here. While waiting for more definite studies, we recommend training in the responsible conduct of research. So it's not so much even avenues for further research, but it connects to larger conversations in the field. And it really focuses also on the greater good, the big picture, because the big picture is here that what is needed or more training is needed to train folks, especially in the Middle East area, to learn about responsible conduct of research, right? So for investigators to enhance their awareness of international norms of research conduct. Because that's the piece that's really interesting in this last paragraph here. Finally, we endorse further understanding of how various non-Western cultures approach scientific research so that certain instances of cultural differences are not misinterpreted as misconduct. I contemplated keeping another paragraph in my example here, but it was getting too long. But just to paraphrase, there was a section in there that really goes into detail about some of the cultural differences in terms of understanding what research misconduct is. And that's really sort of the bigger picture here, and the implications for the greater good, that these training programs, as this data shows, are needed, that these programs can probably really have can have an effect on how research will be conducted in Middle Eastern countries. And here again is the context. For the last decade, formal instruction in the responsible conduct of research has been required for all trainees for public health service training grants in the U.S. These are NIH grants, which my colleagues' program is funded with as well. We also encourage institutions to examine how their structures and processes can further enhance organization, blah, 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 and so on. So here, the avenue for further research is kept fairly small, more definite studies. It is really kind of the authors end this article with suggestions for, the larger implications for the field of research and avoiding research misconduct. So again, to think of that triangle, right, we're in the very broad part here. So just to show you some different ways to approach a slightly different way to structure a discussion. Well, actually, it's structured very similarly in terms of the sequence of rhetorical moves and kind of elements to use in the discussion, but it's a different context in terms of the study. This is a much more qualitative study than the previous one. It was very much, a clinical trial, versus this one with using a questionnaire, different type of research design. Okay, so happy writing with your either analyses or revising your sections, and I look forward to reading all those texts from you.